And Joe Stanley is now with me. Good evening and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Why have some of the members decided to strike on Monday? And I take it this is not something that was just taken lightly or something that's come out of the blue, is it?
No, we've been in bargaining with Fire and Emergency New Zealand for nearly a year now. We started bargaining last year on the 28th of June. We've raised a number of issues over the terms and conditions of employment for firefighters, just to have many of those issues disregarded by Fire and Emergency New Zealand. So this effectively for us is the beginning of a campaign, one, to let Fire and Emergency New Zealand know that we are unhappy with their response to what we've been talking about with them, and two, to let the public know what firefighters are dealing with daily.
Okay, I want to talk about what you are dealing with daily because, as you and I spoke about off air, there are many things I don't believe the public knows that the fire service does. But before we do that, let's discuss the concerns you've had from the lack of response from FENZ. I understand that they cancelled a recruitment drive in April this year. I mean, that's got to add insult to injury, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, Fire and Emergency New Zealand cancelled one of our four scheduled recruitment courses that we have each year. Those courses generally have 24 new firefighters, new career firefighters that will go on the fire trucks. That equates to about 96 new firefighters a year, and currently that matches our attrition rate. So that's just enough firefighters to cover those firefighters that are going. As you would have seen from much of the work that we're doing around our public campaign, staffing is a key issue for career firefighters. We are having trucks unable to be staffed by firefighters every single day in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, our big metropolitan centres, and even across our smaller centres. I spent some time in New Plymouth at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and I'm from Christchurch, because there weren't enough firefighters to cover those trucks there.
Why is this a problem at the moment? Is it a lack of resources? Is it because FENZ needs to get their A into G? What is causing these problems now? Why are we looking at staffing shortages across New Zealand?
I think it's been a lack of future vision by Fire and Emergency New Zealand. Some of the key work that we're doing at the moment is looking at the differences between new firefighter pays and from the careers that we generally compete for firefighters with, the police, the New Zealand Defence Force, sometimes the ambulance. When you look at the pay for those other careers, it's at the lowest $10,000 a year more than a new firefighter. At the highest, it can be upwards of $20,000-$30,000 a year more for new firefighters. That's just firefighters entering into the career, the profession of firefighting. So what that means for us is we have a very, very small recruitment pool. We are trying really hard with our recruitment drive to ensure that we have staffing across the country, but we just don't have the pay to compete with those other organisations. Also, I think there's the issue of, as we talked about earlier today, the emergency medical responses that we're going to, which I think you want to talk about in a second.
Yeah, well, let's get to that now. I mean, I think there's probably many people who understand that you're not putting out fires, you're also attending, car crashes on those motorways, particularly around rural Canterbury. But not just that, you are also, and I don't know if many people know this, the first port of call for the likes of those who may suffer cardiac arrest or serious medical events. It's not just St John Ambulance, and I think that's quite important to mention that tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been attending emergency medical response calls as an organisation since 2013. There were some brigades across the country, Wellington being an example, that did that beforehand. But for us, 2013 is when we started as a profession to go to those calls. There's been very little publicity around it. There was no negotiation, no discussion with the profession, with the career firefighters about what that would mean going to those types of calls. And we've experienced significant trauma from going to those. We don't have any hesitation to go because every time our communities need us, you ring 111 and you ask for fire, a fire truck turns up every single time without question. So we would always go. We've asked Fire and Emergency New Zealand as a part of this process to recognise the fact that we're under-trained. We only get first aid training, which is diabolical considering the type of calls that we go to. And we've had no additional support through psychological support, through wellbeing support or remuneration for that additional layer of incidents, that emergency responses that we're doing.
All right, so let's talk about what FENZ is or isn't doing, the bosses, so wherever they're stationed, excuse the pun. What do you want them to see? What do you want them to hear? What do you want them to do to fix not just the staffing crisis, but the pay?
Yeah, so for us, I think for me personally, looking at the plan that we've put together, the program and the discussions that we've had for the last 12 months around the terms and conditions for firefighters, I've got four key areas that need to be resolved. And we've put forward solutions. Those areas are staffing. We just can't continue to provide the level of service that we want across the country because we don't have enough staff. Recognition of the impact that emergency medical response is having on firefighters, the trauma that we're witnessing. We need access to psychological support because of the support we're providing our communities. We want to be trained better to undertake these types of calls so that we feel more confident when we support our communities, when we go to these calls, so that we know how to deal with the people who are going through terrible, terrible times when they have a loved one or themselves go through a medical response, a medical incident like this. We want the organisation to recognise the risk of occupational cancer in firefighters. As an example of that, we've just asked them in the agreement to put a statement that says we understand that firefighters, due to their occupation, are at risk, a higher risk than the general public for occupational cancers, and they won't even put that in there. We have a tenfold risk for occupational cancer over the general public, which is it's absolutely horrendous. And the cancers that firefighters get are much, much more aggressive. So firefighters generally get more aggressive cancers and have a greater potential to die from them because of the exposure that we have to hazardous carcinogenic materials. And the key, I think, to all of this is we have asked for the organisation to consult with us effectively, to have an engagement process that allows us to talk collaboratively, and they've continued to diminish, devalue, and denigrate our voice as a profession.
What do they stand to gain from doing that, though? Because surely if you work for an organisation, you want your staff base to be happy.
Well, I would hope so. If this was my organisation, I'd want my personnel to be happy as well. I think at times the things that we ask for with regard to our personal protective equipment, the structures that we want in place to support our health and our well-being, come at a cost. So what they look to gain from this is a reduced cost for running the fire service, and not that we ask for the gold standard every time, but if we're putting our lives at risk to save the lives of our community, we at least want the organisation to do everything it can to protect us. And I think that's the big hump there. There are those within the organisation that don't always believe that as firefighters we know best about firefighting, emergency medical response, response to motor vehicle accidents, response to technical rescues, including line abseil rescue. That all we're asking for is them to listen to us properly and to have an open and collaborative forum that requires us to both agree on what our movements forward are, what our evolution of our profession is.
And so just finally, then you're hoping to meet with FENZ this week. What is it, Wednesday today?
Yes.
You're meeting with them?
Yep. Yep. So we're hoping to have a mediation with mediation with FENZ so that we can discuss the claims that we still have on the table, and that they can come to us with, I suppose, a more open mind to what it is that we're asking for. Firefighters, I don't believe, are asking for a tremendous amount in this particular round of bargaining. All we want is to be respected, to be heard, and to have a say in the evolution of our profession.
Well, I hope, Joe, when we next speak, there will be some more positive, or hopefully some positive news. Joe Stanley, thank you so much for your time this evening. I wish you
Thanks,
all the very
Chris.
best. Thank you.
See you.